Adams State College. Great stories begin here.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's ASC faculty lecture. Tonight, it is a great pleasure for me to introduce a veteran of these lectures. Dr. King has done, I think we decided 4. This will probably be his 4th talk in the lecture series. He's been going for 5 years, so he's doing almost one a year, and they're always excellent. They're typically based on research that he has done, and they're always a little quirky. Tonight, he's going to be talking to us about why people who allegedly are intelligent maybe do things on the web that aren't quite so intelligent. But at this point, please join me in welcoming Dr. Brent King.
Wanted to start off kind of fair warning. I don't have any nudity, I don't have any cussing, but we are going to be talking about stupid things that people do online, which means that there might be some pictures that may offend somebody. I'm hoping not, but it's nothing you wouldn't see on the news. As in fact, most of these pictures come from news reports about what these people have done. Just to kind of, a lot of the stuff that we are going to talk about are things that famous people have done, things that we might laugh at, but just to kind of give you a little touch of the reality of this. When I was on my way home yesterday, the news was talking about a story about a veteran from Afghanistan, who's an officer, came home, and one of his fellow officers had responded to a phishing email. Does anybody know what a phishing email is? Okay, what's a phishing email?
Email that pretends to be something else to get personal
Yeah.
information, passwords.
An email that pretends to be from someone else in order to get your passwords, in order to get your username, in order to get access. This phishing email allowed this individual to get his laptop hacked, and then the people who did that got a bunch of identifying information about other fellow officers. So this officer who came home from Afghanistan gets pulled over, and speeding ticket. Instead, they arrest him. And they take him in, and he has outstanding tickets all over the United States. Multiple states. But he just came home. He hasn't even been in the United States. So for the last year, he's hired an attorney, and he's been going around to different states getting all of this cleared up because his identity was stolen because somebody responded to a phishing email. Somebody you would hope would have known you're not supposed to give out your username or your password over email. But they didn't. And so the things we're talking about, yes, some of them are going to be kind of funny, but they also have consequences in the real world. And so that's part of what drove me to do some of this research. Can everybody see everything okay, by the way? Or should I turn the lights off? Some. Okay. So, politicians who've done stupid things online. Anybody recognize this photo? This is Congressman Anthony Weiner, at least a specific part of Anthony Weiner. And this got him, well, he resigned. He probably would have been fired, but he resigned. Here we have another congressman, Christopher Lee, who was another New York congressman, both from New York. So both resigned over this. This was on Craigslist. This was on Twitter, one of many photos sent out on Twitter. Craigslist was trying to meet women, but in fact is married, so got in trouble for that. This is a mayor in Oregon who, during the time when she was supposed to be working in the office, chose instead to go in and pose partially nude with the city trucks. And this was her with a fire truck. And then she posted it on her Facebook. And again, that then got her fired. So, people we would hope know what they're doing, but it appears they made some bad choices. Teachers. Here you have a Florida teacher, posted this on her MySpace page, got fired. Here you have a Georgia teacher. This is still in the courts, and they're trying to decide whether or not she will get her job back. But she posted a series of pictures of her at various parties, all with alcohol, the district decided that that violated her public image clause that was in her contract, and so they let her go. Here you have a person who was going to graduate. This is called the Drunken Pirate photo. And this was an individual, she posted it the night before graduation. She was going to get her teaching certificate, and the school then denied her. This is a school in Pennsylvania. And they said she violated some of her conduct clauses again. And so she was denied her degree. And she lost in court. This one has actually gone all the way through the court system, and the court upheld that particular decision by the school. This is an Ohio teacher who said he was doing a spoof of the Matrix, and you can kind of see the picture of the Matrix poster in the background there, but this picture got him fired. And interestingly, he gave a news report, and agreed to talk to reporters, and he kind of agreed. He said he didn't agree he should have been fired because it was a parody. He wasn't making a threat with anybody, but he understood what the district had done. He said he always told his students, never put anything online that you wouldn't want, your priest or anyone to see, and maybe he made a bad choice. So that's what he said there. Police officers. Here you have a South Carolina police officer who took his car to a car wash at a strip club and then took pictures of it and put it on his Facebook page. Here you have just recently, some of you may have seen this on the news last week, these are some New York police officers who, when they were supposed to be patrolling this parade, decided to step into the parade and dance with the individuals, and now there's an investigation of the NYPD that's being done because of this. Here you have 3 officers in Texas were fired for this. They went to Twin Peaks restaurant, and one of the Twin Peaks waitresses came out and posed with their assault rifles on their car. And then they posted that on their Facebook again. And here you have, it's not a picture of anything. This is actually, you can buy t-shirts, ties, and things like that. This is an image that's put on products you can buy off the internet. An LA police officer put this on his Facebook page and then was let go. So it says, for those who can't see it, I'm going to kick your ass and get away with it. So, it wasn't anything he produced. He didn't make the drawing, he didn't make the item, but he put it online. So these are all, again, potentially questionable decisions by people that led to consequences for them. Other things that you may have seen on the internet, may have seen in the news. This is a Patriots cheerleader who got fired for this. Her roommate got drunk and they wrote a number of words on her in permanent marker, including penis, I love cock, things like that. And then took pictures of it and put it online, and so she got let go. Some of you may be familiar with the Disney actress who sent nude photos of herself to individuals, and then they ended up online. Interestingly, this is one of all the pictures I have up here, Disney stood behind her. And so even though they have the big family image, when she apologized, said it was poor judgment, they did not let her go, didn't fire her out of her contract. She continues to make movies for them. Some of you may recognize Michael Phelps. This cost him some endorsements. And so some of you may have seen that movie, or that picture. This woman lost her child for a while after posting this on her public Facebook page. Now, the investigation determined that this was an empty bong and she was not in fact giving her child marijuana, but a very questionable decision, especially by a parent. So, people, again, we would hope we're making good decisions, not always making good decisions. Other things, maybe not picture-oriented. Recently, the CEO of Sony shared company information about a brand new deal they had made with the iPhone 5 because he forgot he was doing an interview that was being streamed live. And so he let out these company secrets that he wasn't supposed to let out because what he was doing was going over the internet. Virgin Airlines fired 13 crew members who, as a joke, they claim, went on and they made a website that made fun of airline security and had pictures of engines falling off the airplanes and things like that. So including pilots and co-pilots were fired because of that. You had a Connecticut superintendent who was fired for posting confidential employee information on his Facebook page. He was actually sharing the files. No idea why he would do that, but he was. Las Vegas judge posted on his Facebook page racist comments about some of the defendants that had come into his court and made violent threats against prosecutors that were coming before him. Said specifically he was going to bury his foot in their ass. And so, again, a judge who's supposed to be impartial. And then a Trotwood, Ohio police officer was fired for putting the pictures he took of evidence that he was seizing on his Facebook page. So he was actually taking pictures for current cases and putting it out in the public forum. No idea why you would do that again, but they were doing it. Specific to Colorado, we have some interesting cases here. This has been on the news recently. A Mesa County gravedigger was fired for making this video. This is supposedly an empty grave, so he isn't, in theory, dancing on anyone's loved one. But this is him playing an air guitar and dancing in the graveyard. And so he was fired for that, and he's being investigated for potential crimes against cadavers, essentially. Pueblo High School abduction. This happened a few years ago. A girl in Pueblo was abducted. Thankfully, this abduction was seen. They got her back before anything extreme happened. But she was abducted specifically because the person found her on Facebook, figured out what high school she went to from the pictures she had posted on Facebook, and was able to track her down, never communicating her, but only using information that she had put on her social network page. And so he was able to find her there. And then a University of Colorado student, again, this happened a few years ago, she found out after she applied for a job and failed the background check that she had been labeled as a sex offender on her MySpace page, which then went into the public domain. So MySpace had looked at her patterns of behavior in some way and determined that she was acting like a sex offender, and she says she still can't figure out exactly what she did. But then they turned around and reported that. They closed her page down. She didn't go to it often enough to really figure out that it had been closed down. And ultimately, got it corrected, but there for a while she was in public record reported from a social network as potentially being a sex offender. And in fact, had never in her life been convicted of anything or arrested for anything. So, people going onto social network sites, not understanding social network sites, doing things on those network sites that they probably shouldn't be doing, or having things happen because they're on the social network site. So what is driving a lot of these online behaviors you're seeing? Well, one of the questions I was interested in was who's actually seeing things that we're putting out there on our social network sites? When you put something on the internet, who's seeing it? Short answer, which would make this a really short lecture, anyone who wants to. You put it online, people are going to see it. And that's what it essentially boils. If you don't want them to see it. You may have seen in the news last week the issue with actress Scarlett Johansson. Anybody aware of that? What happened?
She claimed her phone or computer was hacked and nude photos got out.
Yes. So nude photos of her got out, claiming that they were hacked from her phone, as has happened with many individuals. And so the information got out. Her lawyer has sent out well over 1,000 cease and desist letters, and I bet if you wanted to jump on there right tonight on Google, type it in, you could find those pictures. So once it's out there, anyone who really wants to track it down, who has the energy and the time to track it down, can potentially find that information. Long answer. Who's actually looking at the internet? Kaplan is, for those of you who have taken your SATs and will be taking your GREs and things like that, Kaplan is known for as a preparation group. They look at the patterns that graduate schools have when they're selecting people. Kaplan sends out a survey to all graduate schools, asks them, what are you looking at for applicants? What they found is that 27% of the graduate schools that replied to them, so obviously not everybody's going to reply to them, but 27% of the graduate schools Google their applicants. So you send an application, they take your name and they put it into Google. And they look to find anything they can on you. 22% directly have hired firms to go in and search Facebook directly, realizing that some people have, privacy locks and things like that. Well, okay, we want to get to that information, so they go out and they actually have someone who has a Facebook page or a MySpace page go out and do searches within those social networks to try to find the person and find any information they can. 95% of this 27, so it's not 95% of graduate schools, but of the ones that said they were doing this, 95% of them say they have specifically either lowered applicants' scores or directly rejected applicants based on the information that they are finding online. So you've sent in your application, you've spent all this time making yourself look great, but now something you did 3 years ago shows up in a Google search, and now all that work is gone because it colors what you look like to those people. Pew Research they have an entire set of individuals who are devoted to just looking at the internet culture. In a 2010 study, 78% of businesses that are out there are Googling applicants. And they say it's probably higher than that. Again, these are the people who are willing to admit it. 78% of businesses are Googling applicants. 53% of businesses have hired companies to help them because they don't have time to do it themselves. So they actually hire companies who are very savvy in how the internet works. They may hire internet security groups to go out and do background checks on the internet. 18% of businesses that responded to Pew said, we have fired people based on the online activities that we have seen them do. So you're already working at this company, you do something stupid online, now you don't have a job. So the long answer is anyone that wants to is looking at it. But specifically, graduate schools, the people who might hire you, the people who have already hired you, they are doing things to check on you online. And the behaviors that you are doing online might come back. Internet use demographics, just looking at some of that. And again, this is Pew Internet and American Life Project. You can go there, it's a huge website. They've got tons of publications about how the internet functions and how we as US and just the world population are using the internet. 50% of the US population belongs to some social network, according to their latest statistics, which was from April of this year. That's up from 8% in 2005. So that's a huge, dramatic increase in how many people are using social networks. 83% of US internet users belong to an interactive social group of some kind, whether it's a forum, a chat group, a social site, online gaming. They belong to some type of social network, meaning that they're going out and they're sharing social information. 65% of US internet users use the social network site that they belong to on a weekly basis, and 41% use it on a daily basis. How many of you have smartphones? And how many of you check your Facebook or things like that on your smartphone? Almost everybody that just raised their hand again. What you see is that Facebook is becoming, especially Facebook, but social networks in general, are becoming so much a part of our culture that they've even now put Facebook updating capabilities in some new cars. You may have seen the advertisements on TV. They have books now they have phones now that as soon as you take a picture or you take a video, the little Facebook button flashes at you, and all you have to do is push that button and it uploads right to your page. So social networks are becoming very integrated into our culture, meaning that more and more the things that you do on those social networks might be seen by people that you maybe don't want to see it. 47% of internet users have uploaded personal photos to social networks. 8% of the US internet population blogs on a daily basis, and 28% on a weekly basis. Blogs are an interesting thing in that quite often people are writing their opinions. And this is the kind of thing where, especially if you write something controversial, it could very much come back to haunt you later on. Again, because as we'll talk about, internet pages don't go away. They're there for a very long time. Here's the August 2011 data. This comes from Nielsen. Nielsen tracks, they start off, and some of you may know them from the Nielsen's ratings from television. They have now moved into tracking internet behaviors of people who live in the United States. And so their August 2011 data, 22.7% of computer time was devoted to just social networks. So about 1/4 of the time that Americans spend on their computer is being devoted to social networking. Now, of course, there's going to be people who are on the high end of that, and there are people on the low end. I don't have a social network page, partly because I do this research. I don't, so I would be down at the 0. My wife, on the other hand, has a social network page and is on it all the time. So she'd be up there around that 25% easily. 10.3% of time is devoted to online gaming. This is the part I have to admit that I do. So this is a social part of gaming, but online gaming, again, has social components. You get to meet people, you network with them, you build groups like guilds. So for example, one of the groups that I belonged to when I was in graduate school, because that was the way to not do work in graduate school, was to play games. You know, my wife got sick. I had people who were in that group sending us get well packages. You know, these are people I had never met. I had never once seen their face. I had only talked to them online, and the social connection was strong enough that I'm sharing the information about my wife being ill, and they're sending get well packages. So this is the kind of social interactions you can get in these online environments. 8.3% is devoted to email. So what used to be the way that we were all communicating is now at the bottom of the way that we're communicating. The big one, again, is those social networks. Facebook, in that month, had 700 billion visits. What? Oh, million, sorry. Okay. 200 million visits for Twitter and 100 million for LinkedIn. Everybody know what LinkedIn is? It's kind of a newer one. It's essentially kind of a networking for, it's meant for professionals. So it's a way for you to connect with other people who work in the same field or to somewhere connect with other people who are professionals and share professional information. MySpace has dropped to the bottom. It's been losing a lot of people on Facebook. Again, when I started doing some of the beginning of this research back in 2007, MySpace had more visits than Facebook. So that just shows you how things have changed in 4 years. So, internet versus real life. Now, first question, do people do stupid things in real life?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we can all probably think of people who have sabotaged their own career. We can probably think of people who have messed up their marriage because of things they've done in the real life. So the internet, the internet is not needed to do something stupid, but there are interesting qualities about the internet that make the things that you do maybe last longer, have a different type of impact, or maybe change the way that you are behaving. So a big one is social presence. We as human beings, and there's an entire field of psychology called social psychology that looks at how the presence of other people influence your behaviors and how your presence influences other people's behaviors. When we grow up, we are trained essentially to interact with people in a face-to-face manner. Online is not face-to-face. Any of you ever run into the situation where you misinterpret what someone has said in an email? And maybe get angry? Maybe you think that they're saying something insulting, but in fact they weren't. One of the big reasons that happens, and a lot of research on the way that people communicate online, shows that we interpret things that people say online incorrectly because we don't have body language cues. We are so used to talking to someone and seeing their cues to let us know whether they're joking, whether they're being sarcastic. We can hear their tone of voice, and that helps us. In the online world, you have emoticons. So I'm making a funny, I'm going to put a little smiley face at the end. That's the best way we have of actually trying to show emotion. But it's still not as good as face-to-face. So social cues and body language are really missing online. This can flip over to the other side where you talk about Anthony Weiner and the fact that he was sending potentially unwanted pictures to people. Well, if I flirt with someone in real life, I can pick up on the social cues. If that person doesn't want to flirt back, I very quickly know, okay, I will back off and go over here. You can send that social cue. But online, you may not get that social cue. The person may want you to go away, but you're not getting it. And so they've actually found that people who maybe already have some difficulties reading social situations will have even more difficulty in an online environment because they're missing, again, a lot of those cues that are in body language. Another problem with the internet is false anonymity. You believe you're anonymous when you go online, if you want to be. You can make up a fake name, you can pretend to be anyone you want, and there's plenty of people who do that. But the reality is that you're not. So here's an anecdotal example. My wife, who again has a Facebook page and uses it all the time, she wanted me to get one. So finally I'm like, okay, fine, I will go online. Open a Facebook page for a very short amount of time. But I opened a Facebook page, I used my middle name, I did not put any identifying information about where I worked, I did not put any photos, I did not put my age, I did not put where I lived. I left a blank slate, as blank as I possibly could, because they have some things they require you to fill in. One of the reasons I didn't want to do that is because I had read all these stories about faculty saying things online and then getting back to students and just mistakes that people make, and I didn't want to do anything like that. So I didn't want any students to find my Facebook page. Within 2 days, I had students' friend requests. Not even using my real, I was using my middle name, but not even using my first name. Not identifying that I was from Adams State College. Because of the couple people that I had befriended, students were able to find my page, and then they were asking for friend requests. So even though I thought I was going to be anonymous, I was not. False anonymity is a situation where, again, when you're online, you think that you're protected, you think you're in control, and the reality is that quite often people can find out who you are. So how many of you have read Dilbert, comic strip? The creator of Dilbert, there was a site that was really slamming his comic book, and a forum, a group of people who didn't like it, and so they were having a lot of critical evaluations of it. So he made up a fake name, went on to that site and started defending his comic strip. It took a very short amount of time for the person who ran the forum to figure out who he was by backtracking things like his computer address. And so there are ways to track down who you are, even if you think you're not. Now, of course, hackers and people who have a lot of technological expertise can create anonymous ways of being online. But in general, it is very difficult to stay completely anonymous, even if you think you're being anonymous. Also, false correlations. This goes into some of the biases that people have and some of the ways that the internet works. Excuse me. One of the interesting things about the internet is that whatever you're into, you can find other people that are into it also. Doesn't matter what you may like, you're going to find a group, a fan site. I was watching television at home tonight, and it was a documentary on fetishes, and they had people who had balloon fetishes, which means they like to rub against balloons. And they were showing how this group has created an online forum to share videos and things like this. So you belong to this forum, and now you trade videos of your time with balloons. And so anything you're into, you can find a group of people on the internet that are into it as well. What that tends to lead to and again, this is just human nature, I talk about the thing that I like. You talk about it too. We both like it. Well, that must mean other people like it. And we start to reinforce our own opinions more and more and more. Then you add into that the fact that search engines like Google and Yahoo will look at where you've gone. So they track what websites you go to, what websites you look for. They'll look at your history. They'll see what you are looking for, and they'll start to send it to you. So when you do a search, you end up only getting information that matches what you already are looking for, what you already are into, and you start to think there's a lot more people who agree with you, whatever your opinion is. And so then, if you believe that a majority of people think this way, I'm going to go ahead and put that in my blog, and you find out, oh, wait, there's only a small percentage of that thought that, and now I'm getting fired. I thought everybody at work hated my boss, and I thought other people would back me up. Oh, nope, guess I'm going to not have a job anymore, which in this economy, not a good thing. So false social, just a lack of understanding of the social situation of the internet, essentially equating real life onto the internet and trying to treat the internet like real life leads to false interpretations. Time. Time works interestingly on the internet. As Dr. Roberts was talking to me earlier today, and he was saying that in the olden days, when he was angry, he would write a letter, just saying how angry he was. And then because you couldn't mail it till the next day, you had the night to sleep on it. And so the next day you tear it up and, okay, I probably shouldn't send that. But now I'm angry. Sit down in front of the computer, fire off an email. Okay, I probably shouldn't have sent that. But there's no way to get it back. That email is gone. It is out there. So the internet is an interesting thing in that it gives you time. If you wanted to take the time to not send the email, if you wanted to sleep on it, you could. But many of us feel, and the research has shown, that you write that email and you send it. You tend to be very impulsive with in communications in an online world. And so that leads to situations where people post things to their Facebook that they want to take it down an hour later, but guess what? People have already seen it, and people maybe have already downloaded it. People have already saved it to their computer. So now it's out there, and now it's being shared again. The breadth of your audience. This again goes back to that social idea. When I come and I talk to you guys, I'm talking to 30 some odd people. But I'm being taped. So actually my audience is anyone who actually wants to sit through a lecture on YouTube. I don't know how many people would want to do that, but you go onto YouTube and they want to listen to an entire lecture, they can do that. So your audience is beyond just the people in front of you. It's anyone who can get to your page who wants to see it. And so people don't think about who they're talking to. They don't think about who's actually going to know the information and look at the information. You end up having an audience that's much, much larger than you may have wanted to. In fact, one of the teacher situations that we saw there, the woman with the swimsuit, she had also posted a derogatory comment about her boss. But she had a privacy setting on her. She actually had her Facebook, she thought, pretty well locked up. And it was only supposed to be shared with friends. So her case is going through the court system right now because a lower court ruled that because she had her privacy settings on, she had an expectation of privacy, and therefore, even though her employers found out about this information, they shouldn't have found out about this information. And so the first court ruled on her side. But she thought she was just sharing with her friends, and then one of her friends had a setting that allowed friend to be shared with friend, and then friend to be shared with friend, and pretty soon you're down, 5 or 6 people down the chain, and all of a sudden a bunch of people know about the information. Other things that can affect the internet. Longevity. If I have a conversation with you, it lasts as long as this conversation does. Maybe we'll remember it tomorrow, maybe we won't. If I walk up and flirt with somebody, it lasts however long that takes place. If I take a picture, Okay, it's going to last however long the picture lasts before it fades. On the internet, stuff lasts forever. An example of that, here is a page I Googled myself, which every once in a while you should do that. Here is a page from 96, 97. So this is a page that is 14 years old. This is when I was an undergraduate. And this was on the 3rd page of Google. So I do a Google search myself, and this is what I come up with. Thankfully, I didn't do anything embarrassing on this page. It's just a list of the officers for the Psych High Club. But this is a club that doesn't exist at that school anymore. The professor who is the advisor is no longer even at the school, but the page still exists. It's still out there. So as long as there is somebody storing the information, it will exist out there on the internet. It may be harder to find as time goes by, but things don't just go away. Ask Kim Kardashian. She's still trying to get rid of her porn video that ended up on the internet. And that's what made her famous, but she has had multiple lawsuits involved trying to get rid of this thing on the internet, and it's still there. Things don't go away once they're on the net. And so you may have an employer who looks for you on Google and finds something you did 10 years ago. That may affect your ability to get employed. So the party that you had your freshman year, get those pictures off the internet somehow. You don't want them out there. Biology and you and the internet. This is research that I would have loved to have included in what I was doing. Unfortunately, here at Adams, we don't have an fMRI or any of the technology that would be needed to do this. But this is research that's coming out of Washington University and the University of Utah, as well as some other institutions. One part of that research looks at the limbic system. I know I have a couple of my students in here, so what does the limbic system control? Anybody? Huh?
Emotional regulation.
Well, sex and aggression is part of it, but emotions in general. The limbic system is your emotional brain. It regulates the emotions that you have, including your sexual behaviors and your aggressive behaviors. One of the interesting things about the limbic system is that it can shut down your logic centers of your brain. It can make them work slower. It can override the logic centers of your brain, which is the frontal lobe. And so the limbic system can get in there, and it's one of the, your fight or flight kicks in. You don't think about what you're doing, you just react. So your emotions can override your logic. What you find with people in internet communications is that things that get them in trouble tend to be of a sexual nature, so they're acting on sexual impulses, or they're making threats against people, or they're actively, being aggressive in their communications. So anger is coming out, and sexual impulses are coming out, and they're acting on them in an impulsive way. And when you take away, again, you don't have the social cues telling you don't do this, you're just there in front of your computer, people end up potentially doing behaviors they may not have done in other situations. So there's a lot of research that's looking at how people act online and then what parts of their brain are activated, specifically when they're looking at sexual content or when they're looking at content that's meant to make them angry, and seeing if they are more impulsive. Some of the early studies are showing that potentially they are more impulsive in front of a computer than they are in real life. Also, computer use and multitasking. One of the interesting things with this research is showing that the more you multitask, the more you have difficulty focusing on any one task. So it's almost like it's kind of rewiring the brain, your brain, the way that it works. We are becoming essentially a culture that always has technology in front of us. So when I sit down to write a paper, when I was an undergraduate, and just to give you kind of an idea, my first year in school when I was a freshman, I took a computer class. It didn't include the internet. So the internet was not part of the computer technology yet. You sit down to write a paper, you write the paper. Today, you sit down to write a paper, oh, you know what, I'm going to check this fact. So you jump onto Google and you check something real fast. Oh wait, as long as I'm here, I'm going to hop onto my email. And then you answer your email. And all of a sudden, you've spent 45 minutes doing other things and not focusing on the original task. There's the research coming out of these universities are showing that the impulsivity parts of the brain, the parts that essentially regulate whether you're impulsive or not, seem to be kind of overactive. People are more impulsive when they're sitting in front of the computer and when they're multitasking than if you put them in isolation away from technology and give them a single task to focus on. And so again, if you're more impulsive, you might be making poorer decisions and doing things that you may not have done. Again, so are you doing things in front of the computer you wouldn't otherwise have done? When I was looking at my specific questions, I was reading all these news reports about what people had done and the stupid things they had done. Part of my questions was, what are actually people putting on their social networks? Because I found in the research, no one had really done a content analysis. We're talking about some of the behaviors that people do online, but what are they actually putting on their social networks? What are they talking about? What pictures are they posting? Certainly we have lots of news reports about politicians who are showing nude pictures of themselves, or actresses or actors doing that, or again, police officers posting things they shouldn't have. But those are anecdotal reports. So if we actually go out and we do an analysis of people who have social networks pages, what are they putting on those pages? What kinds of self-disclosures, what kind of personal information are they putting on those pages? And what factors might influence self-disclosure? So I started looking at factors that tie in with risk behaviors. And I'm a cognitive psychologist, so one of the big ones that I came up with was called locus of control. Locus of control is how you view the primary force that's driving your life. So do you believe that it's you, or do you believe that it's external? And so we have my non-denominational, not going to offend anybody version of God here. Fate, luck, the man's coming down on you. Somehow somebody's forcing you, and that'd be an external force. In academic terms, we call this internal or external. So if you are more internalized with your locus of control, you tend to believe that you are the one driving your choices and your behaviors. If you're more external, you tend to believe that it's other individuals, that it's the situation that is influencing the way that you're going to behave. So that's one of the things that I wanted to look at. Here are some of the relevant findings on locus of control. One thing, young people tend to have a much higher internal locus of control. It tends to get more external as you get older. Again, we can all think of our teenage years, or some of you may be in your teenage years, where you don't really think that anything bad could ever happen to you. And that's because you control your fate. Well, the reality is that other things also influence your fate. From a cognitive perspective, it's healthy to have kind of a balanced locus of control. You recognize when you have control and you recognize when life has control. High internal locus of control has been correlated with a number of risk behaviors. High-risk gamblers, high-risk health behaviors, such again as sexual promiscuity, high-risk sports, such as some of your extreme sports, high-risk behaviors such as drug use and alcohol use. Many of you may have seen documentaries on alcoholics or drug users who talk about, I can quit whenever I want. I'm not an addict. I can stop anytime I want. That's a really high internal locus of control. They believe they have control of the situation, when in fact they don't. Also, looking at economic behaviors, they found very high internal locuses of control on people who do day trading and other high-risk stock types of behaviors. So lots of high-risk behaviors correlated with locus of control. From a cognitive perspective, we call this the fallacy of control. You believe you're in control when in fact you're not. Also, one of the other things, and I was surprised to see no one had really looked into this, online behaviors, you're using technology, do you actually understand that technology? And there hadn't really been any research that looked at that. So do people understand how the internet works? Do they understand their security options? Do they understand their privacy options? Do they understand how online activities such as using email or shopping online actually works? Do they understand that when you go to a web page, you get all kinds of tracking cookies put onto your site or your computer that then track where you go to next? You know, when you go to CNN.com and the advertisement at the top is something you're actually interested in, that's not an accident. They've tracked your history, they've looked at where you've gone, and they've popped up a banner that might be something you want to buy. That's how they sell advertising space. Online persistent worlds. Do you understand how any of these things work? Do you understand what it means if you start sharing information, if you start telling people about yourself? The materials that I used were specifically a demographic questionnaire, an altered version of what's called the Computer Email Web Fluency Scale that looked at computer fluency. This was 75 questions that looked at people's use of technology. We took off, my team and I that did this took off 25 questions that looked at, do you know how to use Office Word? Because we didn't feel that was extremely important. And we added 25 questions that looked at people's knowledge of how the internet works. We also used Waters' locus of control, which is a 28-item forced choice scale. And it's like this, you have A or B. You have to circle which one do I agree with most. Many of the unhappy things in people's lives are partly due to bad luck, or people's misfortunes result from mistakes they make. We look at the overall trend. Each one is worth a certain amount of value. And ultimately, if you have a lower score, that means you have more internal locus of control. And then we asked people for copies of their pages. So copies of their Facebook, copies of their MySpace pages, or any other blog or social site that they belong to. And so we just asked them to print that off for us. So participants came in, we recruited them from here on campus. They came in the lab, we could have up to 4 at a time. We staggered how they were coming in. They filled out the consent form and then the questionnaires. The big part was they gave us a copy of their page. We wanted to maintain anonymity. In order to get through IRB, we had to show that we could make this anonymous. And so we actually let them go through and redact their information. So if they had a spot where their name showed up, they would take a black pen, mark over that, and then right next to it write my name so that I knew what they had removed. We also let them black out their face in any photos of themselves. And ultimately, that was what the IRB agreed would allow for anonymity in the process. We then debriefed them. Again, we weren't doing anything where we weren't telling them why they were there. We told them from the beginning, you're here because we want to know what your content is on your page. But we again told them about it. And when we debriefed them, we gave them a copy of the Department of Justice's website flyer, so how to be safe on the internet. Felt that was kind of our educational piece. When we looked through the website, this is what we were looking for here. Person's name, how many times did it show up? How many times did their address show up? College or job name, age, phone, pictures of themselves at their current age or near their current age, so something that would make them identifiable. Information or pictures about their family, information about their sexual behaviors, either real or fantasy. Fantasy, we included that partly because there was a case in Colorado Springs where a woman who worked for the city was fired because she was writing fan fiction about a swinger's lifestyle. So she was writing stories about things that weren't real, but it was erotica stories, and she was posting them on her blog, and the city felt that that violated her behavior codes. Things that were unethical but not illegal, so people talking about cheating in school. Drinking behaviors, drug use behaviors, violence, real, threatened, or fantasy. I'd like to say up front, we only found threats of violence. Nobody wrote about any real violence, thankfully. Or criminal behaviors. Participants, 261 Adams State College undergrads, 159 of them were female, 102 were male. The average age was 20, standard deviation 1.4. You can see the breakdown of class there. 146 freshmen, 32 sophomores, 36 junior, and 47 seniors. You see the race breakdown here. Roughly 143 Caucasians, so about half were Caucasian, 76 Hispanic, 18 African American, and 24 who fell into other categories or were mixed. Any questions about any of this, by the way? What did we actually find? Well, first thing we looked at was what were the privacy settings that these people had. We had them do a Google search for themselves. So go ahead and do, search for yourself and see if you can find your page. Many of them were surprised to find that they could find their page. They had never done that, didn't realize they could access their Facebook page just by typing their name into Google. So 72% of the sites were accessible to the public. They were set at some level of public setting, meaning that I could type their name in, go find it, and then look at their entire page if I wanted to. 25% had semi-private access, meaning some of their pictures or some of their information available, but to get to all of it, you had to be a friend. And only 3%, 8 of the participants, had full privacy lockdown where you couldn't get to any of their page through searching them on a search network. What did we actually see for technology? 174, 67% of our participants fell into the low category. They did not understand the technology they're using. They know how to use it, and that's about it. They don't really know what it's doing. 54% fell into moderate, so they had some understanding, and 33 fell into the high category, had a good understanding of the technology they were using. Here are the behaviors that we saw. An average of 51.26 times person's name showed up. Again, so with these, obviously this is the mean, so meaning that some people are higher, some people are lower. Pictures, 41 times. College or job mentioned, 39. Giving out their address, and again, just saying what city you lived in was enough to count here, 38 times. Pictures of their family, 32. Age, 13. Drinking, 11. Sexual behaviors, 7 on average. Drug use, 5 on average. Violence, which again were only threats, 4. Giving out their phone number, we were actually surprised. Very few people give out their phone number online, probably because you can talk to them online. Unethical behaviors such as cheating in school, an average of 1. And then criminal behaviors, we found very few comments, and all the criminal behaviors we found were things like, I stole my lunch from my job today, type of stuff. So it was very kind of low petty theft, nothing that we had to turn anybody in for, thankfully. You will see some here that some of the standard deviations are quite large. What you tended to have with some of these behaviors is if a person did it, they did it a lot. And then a number of people would not do it at all. So you tended to see some very big standard deviations with some of these behaviors. Things like sex, where the standard deviation is actually bigger than the mean, because you had some people who were talking about sex a lot and some people who weren't talking about it at all. With locus of control, we found a pretty big correlation with the scores of locus of control, a negative 0.61, significant out to the 0.000. And essentially what this tells us is as your locus of control score, because again the higher scores are more external, so as your locus of control got more external, you were less likely to partake in disclosing information online about the things you were doing, which would tend to make sense. If you think that you have less control, you're less likely to actually disclose information about yourself. Internal locus of control, people who fell into this category were 154, people who fell into the external were 107. When you sit down and you test these two groups against each other, using a t-test, we found significant differences. In all cases, people who were internal were doing these things more than the external. In name, college, job, picture of self, picture of family, sexual behaviors, drinking behaviors, drug use behaviors, and threats of violence. So people with internal locus of control were partaking in these behaviors and disclosing this information at a significantly higher rate in all of these categories. Technology, again, because we had such a small group of people who actually fell into the high category, we didn't run groups. I'd actually like to find people out there who know a lot about technology and have them, so I can kind of, make the groups more even there. What we had was a very strong correlation here again that, oh, that said Rotters. Sorry, that's my mistake. That should be the technology one. But 81% on some questions we had about how do you get rid of information that's on the internet, 81% of our participants believed that they could completely take something off the internet when they wanted to. So if they wanted to get rid of something, they just had to log on and delete it. Does anybody know what happens if you try to delete your Facebook page? Can you delete it? I'm seeing some people shake their heads.
Yeah.
You can kind of delete it if you individually go in and take everything down, change the information. There's even programs you can download that will ruin your Facebook page for you and change the password so that you can never get back to it. So they actually, one of them is called Kill Facebook and things like that. But technically, Facebook owns your page. So they have somewhere on their server a copy of your page. If they wanted to, they could put it back up. I mean, technically, they own the page. So it's very difficult to delete anything. Scarlett Johansson, again, sent out all those cease and desist letters. I'm betting that there's a whole bunch of teenage boys that downloaded that picture as soon as they saw it, meaning that it's not gone. Anytime they want to put it back up on their blog, they can. So once you put something out on the internet, it's there. But a large portion of our particular population here, or our sample, did not get that. They didn't understand, the longevity of things on the internet. 38 believed that their page could not even be found by search engines. That there was no way that Facebook and MySpace, they don't tie into search engines. So why would someone be able to find me? And so again, there was a lot of people that we shocked when they told them, sit down and do a search for yourself. And then all of a sudden their page is there. And they just didn't realize that they could do that. So, from all of this, have we answered why people do stupid things online? No. We have seen a couple individual things and individual factors that might tell us why some people are doing stupid things online. But why do people do stupid things in real life? We've been asking that question for years. So I don't think we're going to get the answer of why people do stupid things online any more than we get why people do stupid things in real life. What we can do, though, is look at some of the factors that are influencing people's behaviors in an online environment and make some recommendations about changes we might make. One of the big ones that I would recommend is to actually make sure the public understands the technology. So if you're going to jump on and use Facebook, then you need to understand it. So for example, there was another teacher in South Carolina who got fired because she made some racist comments about some of the students in her class. Absolutely horrible things to say. What happened, and the reason she got caught though, is because she had her privacy settings completely wide open. And she thought she was only sharing with friends. And so she didn't understand the technology. Teenagers, they often find that many teenagers think that they have set their privacy settings so it's private, but in fact people can get to it. So they don't understand what they're doing. And so just some education, maybe including it in your basic computer classes. Since so many people are using social networks, include some basic education about how they function. This is one that social networks default. Any of you who've used Facebook have potentially ran into this. Every time they change their settings and they go in and they revamp their privacy settings, it defaults back to being wide open. And you have to go in and actively put it to the privacy settings that you want. A real easy change that privacy advocacy groups have been pushing for is to just ask the companies, could you default to the highest settings? And that way we're not sharing information by accident, because you've changed your privacy settings and I didn't realize it and I didn't update it. And so just ask them, right now you default to the lowest settings. How about you just switch it and default to the highest settings? And then I will go in and actively make things available that I want to be available. And one of the big ones that, because there's a lot of court cases going on about these things, but again, people are being fired, so they challenge that in court, making clear court decisions. Because right now it's all over the place. You've got some courts that have upheld the firings, you've got some courts that have said no, and then we have the entire area of Googling people to begin with. If someone comes in for an interview, you're not allowed to ask them, are you married? Do you have kids? Are you gay? You're not allowed to ask any of those things. But right now, there isn't any law really, it's a real gray area. I can go look for them on the internet. I can, and you have actually a guy who is suing right now because he found out he didn't get hired for a particular job because on his social network page he had a picture of him kissing his boyfriend. And then he had a friend who worked there who told him, look, they're not going to hire you because you had that up there. And so he turned around and he sued them. And so that's going through the court. But was that legal? Was that legal for them to go out and look for him on the internet to find out this information? Because I can't ask you when you're here, but can I go ahead and wait till you're gone and then just look for the information online? How is that different? So it's a real gray area. It's one of those areas where the technology is essentially ahead of the law. And I think it'll take a while for the law to catch up. But until then, we're going to have a lot of court cases, and there already are a ton of court cases for people who have been let go or denied employment or some, some form of that, and then they say, look, that was private information. You weren't supposed to know it. And the employer says, it was on Google. It took me 5 minutes to find it. How is that private? So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But in the meantime, message is lock down your social network sites and don't share anything you wouldn't want your priest to know. So, any questions?
Adams State College. Great stories begin here.